Good evening and welcome. Tonight we'll be going over the history and geography of Liechtenstein. And I know it's technically pronounced Liechtenstein. In English we say Liechtenstein, but it's really interchangeable. In English you can say either or. I'm sticking with the American English pronunciation of Liechtenstein, so don't blow a gasket. It's totally fine. Liechtenstein is located in Western Europe. As you can see, it is very small. It is one of the European microstates. It lists them over here. It is bordered by Austria over here, and this whole border is with Switzerland. This right here is the Rhine River, flowing right along this long border with Switzerland. And it's not just dominated by the Rhine River, it's also very much dominated by the Alps mountains that take up this whole section of this tiny little country. The European Alps are very, very high right here. There's a big valley that stretches down through here. And the highest peak is right down here, right here. It's called Grauspitz. But these mountains are perfect for skiing, as you saw in the intro. So, when people visit Liechtenstein, they're mostly there to ski or conduct some kind of business. But we'll get to that later. Historically, Liechtenstein split into two sections. Up here, we have the Unterland, and down here we have the Oberland. And the capital city of Vaduz is right there. It's really beautiful. I'm going to pull up my tablet after I do history and show you this remarkable country. It reminds me a lot of Austria, and that's probably because Austria is literally right here. But it's all of the beautiful elements of the Austrian landscape just mushed together. This whole section here is the beautiful valley created by the Rhine River. And then this is all the big, snowy, gorgeous, majestic mountains. So I can't wait to show you on the tablet. But let's talk about its history. Why is this tiny nation here? And how do we get to this point that it's at today? Let's find out. The earliest peoples that lived in this area would have started farming down in the valley around 5300 BCE. Later, various Celtic tribes would live in this area. They would eventually be conquered and defeated by Julius Caesar down in the Roman Empire in 58 BCE, and this area became part of a Roman province known as Raetia. Eventually, though, many Germanic tribes would invade the Western Roman Empire's regions. The people that invaded this area were known as the Alemanni, and they did so in about the year 260, and it became part of a region that they conquered, or they ruled over, known as Alemannia. And this is where, for the most part, that the German language became the lingua franca of the country. They still speak German here today. Eventually, though, the Alemanni were defeated by Clovis I, an ancient Frankish king. So this area came under the control of the Frankish Empire. Eventually, the Frankish Empire would come under the control of the Holy Roman Empire in about the year 1000. And eventually, the Holy Roman Empire would come under the control of the Habsburg family over in Austria. So the Habsburgs had dominion over this area for the most part. They had some good friends known as the Liechtensteins, and they allowed them to own the area from 1140 to sometime in the 13th century. The city of Vaduz was established in 1342. Liechtenstein was in the crosshairs of a lot of wars that the Habsburgs got into, mainly the 30 Years' War and all the little tiny ones. They had a really bad bout of the plague in the 17th century, and they even had an era of witch trials. It got to that point where you're confined in all of this turmoil for so long, you gotta blame it on something, and it was blamed on witches. Eventually, though, in 1699, the land was purchased by Prince Johann of Liechtenstein. He wasn't a prince when he bought it. He wanted to be a prince, so he went to his friends, the Habsburgs, and said, "Could I be a prince? My family historically owned this area. What if I bought it off of you and made it a principality?" And they said, "Okay." So, first he purchased Schellenberg up here. Schellenberg's up here. Right there. Schellenberg. So this area over here. In what was it? Oh, it's 1699. In 1712, he'd purchased Vaduz and wound up owning pretty much the entirety of the country today, and gave it the name of Liechtenstein after himself. And in 1719, it officially became a principality. So then Johann became Prince Johann. It's still ruled by the princes today. We'll talk about it in its history a little bit, but it's an absolute monarchy today. Oh, skipping way too far ahead. Hold on. I know I'm skipping so much in history, but that's a little too fast. We need to talk about Napoleon. So, Napoleon would wind up destroying the Holy Roman Empire during his wild invasion of various parts of Europe. Liechtenstein wound up being left all alone. Napoleon didn't really see it as an important piece to his European puzzle. Even though they were sort of pro-Napoleon, he didn't bother taking it over and conquering it. So they decided to ally with Germany. They spoke German, and the German Federation formed out of the ashes of the Holy Roman Empire. It included Austria and various other Germanic parts of Europe. And once that would break apart, it would form Germany and then Austria. But hold on, I'm getting way too far ahead of myself. They joined the German Federation and allied themselves with what was soon to become Germany. Germany was bound to Austria and what was left of the Habsburg dynasty, and they were very anti-Prussian, their neighbors over to the east, that was ready and willing to take control. So as part of the German Federation, they had to have an army. So they had an army of 100 men. When they were asked to defend the border of Tyrol in Austria from the Italians, they sent 80 soldiers to defend it, and they returned with 81. It's a famous history fact there. They picked up a friend along the way. They picked up an Austrian soldier who decided to join them. So in 1868, once the German Federation collapsed for the most part, and Liechtenstein was left all alone again, they disbanded their army because there was no need for it anymore. And they officially declared neutrality, and they started to ally themselves more with Switzerland than Germany, but they would always have close ties to Austria. Now, technically, Otto von Bismarck never signed off the peace treaty with Liechtenstein during this war with Prussia. So he didn't think it was important enough to do so. So technically the war never ended in Liechtenstein. They're still technically at war with Germany. It's the world's longest technical war. But that's just one silly random fact about Liechtenstein. Also, Russia offered to sell them Alaska at one point, and they turned it down. So then they offered it to the Americans, and the Americans bought it. Can you imagine how much this country's history would have changed if they'd bought Alaska? Anyway, so many random, strange little Liechtenstein facts. They remained neutral mostly through World War I. They got a bit tangled up because they were still allied with the Habsburgs and the Austrians, who obviously was a big proponent in the war. But when World War II rolled around, they definitely remained as neutral as possible. They allied again with Switzerland, who were very famously neutral. And even though, the Germans invaded and absorbed Austria, they didn't bother with Liechtenstein. They didn't think it was important enough. The story of its history, right? It's never important enough to get too involved in European politics and history, but just enough to be mentioned. So, after World War II, their resources were pretty stretched thin. Since they were neutral, they supported both sides of the war. So, they were abandoned by their two friends over here. Switzerland didn't like it because they're not supposed to support anyone. The Austrians didn't like it, well, the Germans, I should say, at that point, because they were harboring Jewish people in their country, and so they were pretty bankrupt. They took in many, many refugees from the area, especially toward the end with the Soviets. They took in a lot of like people who abandoned their posts, and the Soviets demanded them back. Liechtenstein said no. So they were pretty much out of money at that point. They didn't have very much to begin with, and now they were pretty much bankrupt. So the royal family at this time, the princes of Liechtenstein, focused entirely on modernization. They established what would eventually become a tax haven, and it was during this point that Liechtenstein became recognized as like a full-on country, because it was always kind of like a part of other countries. It was always allied with other countries. This time they were finally alone. So that's when Liechtenstein officially became Liechtenstein as we know it today. And like I said, the current prince put in a referendum to have absolute power, and it passed. And then he put in another one to have absolute veto power, and it passed. So it's a little terrifying. I mean, that is the open door to a dictatorship. But I feel like the people voted for that because what else are they doing? There's not much else going on. And that's pretty much where Liechtenstein is today. The tax haven thing got a little iffy. They made it all smoothed out and legalized in the early 2000s, just before the economic crisis, so that there was no shady dealings happening in the country. Today, they're the leading producer of dentures, and there's a lot of banks in Liechtenstein. And that's pretty much it. Lots of beautiful mountains and scenery and skiing and historic sites. You can see Vaduz castles listed on here. And that's pretty much it for Liechtenstein. Let me go grab my tablet and we'll take a look at this beautiful country. Alright, so I zoomed out a bit so you could see Liechtenstein here. And let me zoom out even more so you could really see where we are in the world. So you see the dot is where Liechtenstein is. Here we are in Europe, Switzerland and Austria, and the rest of Europe. So that is where we're located. You can see the Alps from up here. Let's check out this country. Let's start in Vaduz. Oh, let me show you the 3D view so you can really see what I mean by these mountains. So you can see the Rhine River going through in this lower section here, and then big mountains, and there's the valley here. And then I believe the border with Austria is up in these mountains. It doesn't show it on this, but it's there. Let's start with Vaduz. Let's take a look. It's not a huge city, as you can imagine. It's a very tiny country, so let's look at some of the pictures. Here's the palace, and the big church, and various other old buildings here. Let's see. A little downtown area. All the accounts that I read of people who visited said the streets are deserted, that it just looks like this. And you can see this is a tourist right here. These kind of look like tourists too. They're out shopping. They say that it's so sparse there. So beautiful. Look at this. Up close of the palace there. Some modern art too. The big church there. And the interior. More modern art. Artifacts, statues, very old buildings. The postage stamp museum, a big draw for, apparently for postage stamp collectors. It's like one of the best museums for postage stamps. Good old Liechtenstein. So yeah, that is pretty much it. You can see the castle up here. kind of neat on Google Earth. It's a little squished in the 3D view, but that's it. There's the postage stamp museum. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's go take a look. I want to show you up in the mountains the town that I really liked. So I get around all these big peaks. Oops, I don't want to get lost. Is Malbon. This town is gorgeous. It's a little ski resort town right in the middle of these mountains. It is so picturesque. Look how beautiful. Can you imagine? It's like, I always say this is someone's everyday. Like, there's people that live here that see this every day. This is their whole humdrum every day. And it's just so spectacular. Wow. Look how high up you are on that peak. Skiing down the hills there. Very old church. It's very cute. Just absolutely gorgeous scenery. Little kitty slopes. Yeah, beautiful, right? So neat. Just in this valley here. Look how steep. Like, it's perfect for skiing, right? Absolutely perfect for skiing. There's a few more down. Steg is another one. Let's look at Steg. Like, are you kidding me? It's so pretty here. Ugh. I just want to, like, walk around. I mean, it would surely be exhausting because of all the mountains, but I just want to, like, go and take all this in. Like, it's so scenic. So you see what I mean when I say it's, like, every bit of beautiful Austrian scenery just, like, in one small place. It's, like, I can't get over it. I've been looking at pictures of Liechtenstein for days doing my research for the country, and it's, like, every single one is just like art. This could be a painting, right? It's so beautiful. Look at the little village there. You think that like, oh, is that like the resort cabins? No, that's the village. That's where the people live. That's their everyday. So yeah, I totally see that's Austria over here. Oh, you can see the line in the satellite imagery. Let's go back over the mountains. Let's see, I always find little fun places to show you guys. And I found this. Check it out. It's a rope park. Look at, I'm not a heights person, but I would do something like this. I'd be terrified and crying, but I'd have a fun time. How neat. You can go do a rope park. Oh, some moo cows. All the flags, that's neat too. Little kid practice area. Get your climbing gear. I know this has not much to do with like Liechtenstein history, but there's not much to show you in Liechtenstein other than beautiful mountains and things. But this is so cool. I mean, who else would want to do this? Look how fun. That's so neat. I would absolutely do that, even though I am so chicken about heights. Beautiful river there. And that is pretty much all there is to it. It's just fun to look at this 3D view of the Big Alps mountains. See, like if I keep going like this and I go up too far, I'm gonna wind up in Switzerland, so I have to be careful. Let's go back to 2D. Make sure I'm still in the country. Oh, it's so hard to tell. Let's see. Boom. Liechtenstein. Yep. Ooh, we were good. So that's pretty much all I have to show you. I know this is a short video, but it's a microstate, and we're going to look at a couple other microstates later this week. So be prepared for shorter videos, I suppose, but entertaining ones nonetheless. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very good night. Good night.